The champagne glass shattered at my feet as her hand connected with my cheek. 200 guests gasped. My mother-in-law stood there, trembling with rage, while my sister-in-law smirked behind her bouquet. I touched my burning face, humiliated. Then my brother walked through those ballroom doors, and everything changed forever. Before we dive into this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you won't believe how this unfolds. Trust me, you'll want to hear every single detail. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Nicole, and 3 years ago, I married the man I thought was my forever. Derek was everything I'd hoped for. Kind, gentle, and he loved me despite coming from a completely different world. I'm an elementary school teacher from a modest background. My parents worked 2 jobs each just to keep food on the table and send me to college. Derek's family, well, they had money, old money. The kind of money that comes with expectations, country club memberships, and a whole lot of judgment. From day one, Derek's mother, Margaret, made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her son. It wasn't always loud or obvious. No, Margaret was too sophisticated for that. Instead, it was the little comments. The way she'd touch my dress at family dinners and say, "Oh, how quaint. Is this from that little department store downtown?" Or how she'd ask Derek, right in front of me, if he was sure about his choices, with this pointed look in my direction. My sister-in-law, Vanessa, was no better. She was Margaret's golden child, and she made sure I knew it. Every conversation somehow turned into a comparison, and I always came up short. Derek tried to keep the peace. He'd squeeze my hand under the table during family dinners and whisper that I should ignore them. "That's just how they are," he'd say. But ignoring someone's cruelty doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes you feel more alone. Still, I loved Derek, and I believed that love would be enough. I thought eventually they'd see me for who I really was. I was so wrong. Now I need to tell you about my brother, Anthony. 10 years ago, he left our small hometown with nothing but a business degree and a dream. He'd always been ambitious, always talking about making something of himself. At first, we talked all the time. Then the calls became monthly. Then occasional holiday texts. Life got busy for both of us, I guess. I knew he was doing well in business, but I had no idea just how well. That detail becomes important later, so keep it in mind. Everything came to a head when Vanessa got engaged to Preston, some hotshot real estate developer with family money that even impressed Margaret. The announcement dinner was insufferable. Margaret practically glowed as she talked about the wedding plans, the guest list filled with senators and socialites. Then she turned to me with this smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Nicole dear, perhaps you can help with the engagement party preparations. I know you're so good at simple tasks." Vanessa laughed into her wine glass. Derek said nothing. I smiled and nodded because that's what I always did. The next 2 weeks were torture. Margaret had me running all over town, picking up decorations, confirming vendor appointments, and basically acting as her unpaid assistant. Every choice I made was wrong. The flowers I selected were too ordinary. The ribbon color was completely off. Meanwhile, Vanessa would breeze in, glance at everything, and make some comment about how she hoped I hadn't ruined anything important. My best friend Lisa kept telling me to stand up for myself, to tell Derek how bad it had gotten. But I kept thinking, just get through the party. Then things will calm down. The day of the engagement party arrived, and let me tell you, Margaret had outdone herself. She'd rented out the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, the most exclusive venue in the city. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet, and over 200 guests dressed in designer everything. I wore a simple black dress that I'd saved up for, nothing fancy, but elegant enough, or so I thought. The moment Margaret saw me, her lips pursed. "That's what you're wearing? Well, I suppose we can't all afford proper evening wear." Vanessa, draped in a custom gown that probably cost more than my car, gave me a pitying look that made my stomach turn. I spent the first hour of the party trying to make myself invisible. I'd smile politely when spoken to, but mostly I just helped wherever I was needed, even though I was supposed to be a guest. I overheard clusters of Margaret's friends whispering about me. "That's the daughter-in-law," one woman said. "Yes, she's from, well, nobody really knows. Derek could have done so much better." Each whisper felt like a tiny cut, and by the time Derek finally arrived from work, I was barely holding it together. He kissed my cheek and told me I looked beautiful. But when I tried to tell him about his mother's comments, he just sighed. "Not tonight, Nicole. Please, let's just get through this." That's when everything fell apart. They were bringing out the engagement cake, this massive 7-tier masterpiece, covered in edible gold and sugar flowers. Everyone gathered around to take pictures. Margaret was directing traffic like a general, and somehow I ended up being asked to help serve, as if I was staff. I was carrying champagne glasses to the cake table when someone bumped into me from behind. The glasses tilted, champagne sloshed out, and a few drops landed near the base of the cake. Not on it, near it. The cake was completely fine. But Vanessa screamed like I'd set the building on fire. "My cake! She ruined my cake!" Margaret spun around, her face already red with rage, and stormed toward me. The entire room went silent. 200 people turned to stare at me, standing there with empty champagne glasses and a few drops of liquid on the pristine white tablecloth. I tried to explain. "I'm so sorry. Someone bumped into me, but the cake is fine." "Look," Margaret cut me off. "You've always been jealous of Vanessa. You can't stand that she's marrying into a respected family while you trapped my son." The words hit me like a physical blow. My hands started shaking. "That's not fair. I started to say, but Margaret wasn't done. Her voice rose so everyone could hear. "You don't belong in this family, Nicole. You never have. You're an embarrassment." And then, before I could process what was happening, her hand flew across my face. The slap echoed through the silent ballroom. My cheek exploded with heat and pain. I stood there, frozen, my hand slowly rising to touch my burning face. I could feel tears forming, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of all these people. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of phones being pulled out. Everyone was recording, everyone was watching. Margaret stood there, breathing hard, her hand still raised slightly, as if she might hit me again. Vanessa stood behind her mother, with this satisfied smirk on her face, like this was exactly what she'd wanted all along. Preston looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. And Derek finally moved, taking a step forward, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He was going to try to smooth this over, to calm his mother down, to ask me to just apologize so we could all move on. I could see it all playing out, the same pattern we'd been stuck in for 3 years. That's when the ballroom doors opened. I heard them before I saw them, the heavy double doors swinging wide with this cinematic timing that didn't feel real. A man walked in, and I'm telling you, the energy in that room shifted instantly. He wore a suit that probably cost more than the entire cake, moved with this quiet confidence that made people step aside without him saying a word. 2 other people in professional attire followed him, carrying themselves like they belonged anywhere they chose to be. And then he looked at me, and my heart nearly stopped. It was Anthony, my brother. I hadn't seen him in person in almost 3 years, and he looked completely different, older, more polished, but with that same protective fire in his eyes that I remembered from when we were kids. He walked straight toward us, his eyes never leaving my face, probably seeing the red mark Margaret's hand had left. The crowd parted for him automatically. When he reached us, he stopped and looked at Margaret with this calm expression that was somehow more intimidating than any anger could have been. "I'm Nicole's brother," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Is there a problem here?" Margaret, still riding high on her rage, barely glanced at him. "This is a private family matter. I don't know who you are, but you need to leave." She actually waved her hand at him dismissively, like he was a waiter who'd wandered into the wrong section. Anthony smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Family matter? Let's talk about family then. He looked around the room, addressing everyone now. My name is Anthony Clark. Some of you might know that name. A ripple went through the crowd. Preston's face went pale. Someone gasped. Anthony continued, completely calm. I'm the CEO of Clark Investment Group. We manage several billion in assets. We also happen to own this hotel. He gestured around the beautiful ballroom and the building where Preston's company leases their main office. The shift in the room was instant. Margaret's confidence crumbled. Vanessa's smirk disappeared. Preston looked like he might be sick. Derek just stared, finally understanding that he'd completely underestimated who I was, where I came from, what my family had become. But Anthony wasn't done. He turned to the hotel manager, who'd appeared at his side. Could you please play the security footage from the lobby earlier this evening? I think everyone would find it interesting. On a screen that had been set up for the engagement photos, footage appeared. It showed Margaret and Vanessa standing in the hotel lobby 2 hours earlier. The audio was crystal clear. Margaret's voice saying, "Just wait until everyone sees how out of place she looks tonight. Derek will finally see what a mistake he made." Vanessa laughing and adding, "Maybe she'll finally get the hint and leave. Then Derek can find someone appropriate." The guests watched in shocked silence. Some of them had been part of those earlier whispered conversations about me. Now they were seeing exactly who the real villains were. Anthony walked closer to Margaret. His voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was steel underneath it. "For 3 years, you've treated my sister like she's worthless. You've belittled her, excluded her, and made her feel small. Tonight, you physically assaulted her in front of 200 witnesses." Margaret tried to speak, but Anthony held up his hand. "My sister has more class and grace in her little finger than this entire display of wealth and status. She's an elementary school teacher who shapes young minds every single day. She works with special needs children and stays late without pay to make sure no child is left behind. She's kind, compassionate, and genuine. Everything you pretend to be, but aren't." The room was so quiet, you could hear people breathing. Anthony turned to Preston, and his tone became almost conversational. "Preston, we need to talk about that lease renewal coming up next month. You know, the one for your company's headquarters?" Preston stepped forward quickly, his voice shaking. "Mr. Clark, please, I had nothing to do with—" Anthony cut him off. "You stood there and watched your future mother-in-law assault someone. You did nothing. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. I don't do business with people who tolerate cruelty, and I certainly don't do business with families who would treat someone like my sister the way you all have treated her." Margaret's face had gone from red to white. She actually reached out toward Anthony, her voice breaking. "Please, you don't understand. It was a misunderstanding. I was upset about the cake." Anthony's laugh was cold. "The cake is fine. You were upset because you're a bully who finally got called out. You're upset because your son married someone real instead of another shallow social climber like your daughter." Vanessa gasped, tears starting to run down her carefully made-up face. Preston looked torn between defending his fiancée and saving his business. The guests were recording everything. This was going to be all over social media within the hour. Then Anthony did something I didn't expect. He turned to me, and his voice softened completely. "Nicole, what do you want to happen here? This is your call." For 3 years, I'd been silent. For 3 years, I'd swallowed every insult, every dismissal, every moment of disrespect, because I thought that's what love required. Because I thought if I just endured it, things would get better. But standing there with my face still burning from Margaret's slap, with my brother beside me, with all these people watching, I finally found my voice. I looked at Margaret, and I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just spoke the truth. "You've never given me a chance. From the moment I met you, you decided I wasn't good enough, and nothing I did would ever change your mind. I've been respectful, I've been kind, I've helped you, supported this family, and tried to earn your acceptance. But I'm done trying to please someone who will never be pleased. I deserve respect, and I won't accept anything less anymore. Then I turned to Derek, and this was the hardest part. You've let this happen. Every single time your mother belittled me, every time Vanessa mocked me, you asked me to be patient, to understand, to not make waves. You chose your comfort over my dignity. That has to change, starting right now. You need to decide who you're going to protect, your wife or your mother's feelings. I watched Derek's face cycle through emotions, shame, realization, fear. He stepped away from his mother and came to stand beside me. His voice was rough when he spoke. You're right. I'm so sorry, Nicole. I've failed you over and over again. And I see that now. Mom, what you did tonight is unforgivable. What you've done for years is unforgivable. Nicole is my wife, and if you can't treat her with respect, then you won't be part of our lives. Margaret started to protest, but Derek held firm for the first time in our entire marriage. I mean it. We're done making excuses for you. Anthony nodded at me, pride clear in his eyes, then looked around the room one final time. I think we're finished here. Nicole, Derek, let's go. We walked out of that ballroom with our heads high, leaving behind a party in complete chaos. Behind us, I could hear Vanessa crying, Margaret trying to salvage the situation, guests whispering and typing furiously on their phones. Preston was probably already calling his lawyers, but none of that mattered anymore. Outside, Anthony pulled me into a hug. I'm sorry I wasn't around more. I should have checked in, should have known what you were dealing with. I hugged him back, finally letting the tears fall now that we were away from all those watching eyes. How did you know to come tonight? Anthony pulled back and smiled. You mentioned the party in a text last week. Something about your tone made me worried, so I decided to surprise you. Then I saw how they were treating you in the lobby, and I knew I needed to step in. I've been building my company for years, staying quiet, staying focused, but family comes first. Always. The days that followed were intense. The video of Margaret slapping me went viral. Her social circle turned on her overnight because nobody wants to be associated with that kind of public scandal. Vanessa and Preston's engagement was strained. He did end up keeping his lease, but Anthony made sure there were ironclad conditions about ethical behavior and public image tied to it. Margaret called 3 days later, and for the first time in 3 years, she genuinely apologized. Not because she wanted something, but because she'd lost everything that mattered to her. Her reputation, her social standing, her son's respect. Vanessa sent flowers with a note that simply said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Derek and I spent weeks in counseling, working through the patterns that had nearly destroyed our marriage. He had to learn to set boundaries with his family, to stand up even when it was uncomfortable, to choose our partnership over his mother's approval. It wasn't easy, but he showed up for the work. He showed up for me. And slowly, we started rebuilding trust. Anthony and I reconnected in a way we hadn't since we were kids. He explained how he'd built his fortune through smart investments and tireless work, but he'd also stayed humble, remembering where we came from. Money doesn't change who you are, he told me. It just amplifies it. If you're kind, you become more generous. If you're cruel, you just become a bigger bully. You stayed kind through everything, Nicole. That's real strength. Margaret and I have a polite but distant relationship now. She respects boundaries, watches her words, and has actually started treating me like a human being. It's not warm, and maybe it never will be, but it's honest. Vanessa and I will never be close, but we've reached a place of mutual civility. And Derek, he's become the husband I always knew he could be, the man who stands beside me instead of asking me to stand down. I'm still teaching, still working with kids who need extra help and patience, still living authentically, not trying to be someone I'm not to fit into someone else's idea of worthy. Because here's what I learned that night. Your value doesn't come from other people's approval. It comes from knowing who you are and refusing to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. That slap was the wake-up call I needed to stop accepting crumbs when I deserved the whole meal. And that's how one slap changed everything. My brother didn't save me that night. He gave me the platform to save myself. Sometimes the people who disappear from your life are out there becoming exactly what you'll need them to be. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me, have you ever had someone unexpected come to your defense? And don't forget to subscribe, because I've got more unbelievable true stories coming your way. Thanks for watching, and remember, never let anyone make you feel small. You're worth so much more than that.